Hey everybody, welcome back to Backlog Banter. I'm your boy Abram, joined as always by Mr. Tucker Hazel, and we're here today to, I think, principally take the community to task. Because we're here to discuss the, in fairness, ambiguous question of
Yes.
whether fun is good as it
Yes.
relates to video games. However, folks, this is our second time trying to record the video.
Yeah. As of right now, the video recording is 35 minutes and 25 seconds long, and now
Yeah.
we're starting the video.
True. But it's your fault in the
Me?
audience here.
Oh, okay.
No, not you. I was
I
pointing
don't know,
because
the finger
it's
felt like it was coming at me.
well, it's tricky because it could be coming at you, but I mean for it to go through the camera.
Sure.
If you're watching this
I'll
on
dodge.
if you're watching this on a Sony TV with 3D glasses on, you can touch my finger.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just make some sort of reference for how that has been. You can't do that. You could play Sonic Generations on PS3 in 3D with a 3D TV and glasses,
Wow.
which is interesting.
Wow.
Which would have been fun to do, Tucker.
But
And we love fun, or do
Yeah.
we? That's the question for today's video here. We have so many submissions from you guys. I think probably the most submissions we've ever gotten for a video,
I think that's probably true.
which is pretty cool. But all your submissions have a fatal flaw in it.
You
And I
care
think
too
the
much.
yeah, this is I think where we ought to start the video actually,
Sure.
because part of the pitfall we ended up in when we tried
Yes.
to record it the first time
Yeah.
is that fun. It's not a very concrete idea.
Yes, true.
Actually, as our friend Sis Scott here says, I do like fun, though what's fun for me isn't fun for everyone else. I enjoy grinding in JRPGs, just see numbers go up. I like leveling in games since it makes a dopamine hit. It's an interesting idea because that for me is not fun.
Yeah.
And the problem we were running in, well, we say we, but it's really my problem that I derailed the whole thing, and then Tucker got me into the quagmire.
Yeah.
Everybody's
team.
comments here are contingent on fun
Yeah.
because that's the prompt.
Mhm.
But it's contingent on everybody's personal definition of fun
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and speaking in relation to that. And that makes it tricky to have this conversation. What I was drawing into discussion here in my sort of quagmire era was the famous Neil Druckmann quote from a couple of years ago, for many years ago now at this point, before Last of Us 2 came out, where he was saying that Naughty Dog doesn't necessarily try to make fun games. The fun is not a word they use in the studio, something like that. And got he got everybody all up in arms, freaking out.
Yeah.
Naughty Dog is, they're just trying to make movies. They're not making fun games, whatever.
Mhm.
Garden variety, YouTuber, discourse, rage, horse shit was happening 5 years ago about Last of Us Part 2. But it got me realizing, like, everybody got up in arms about that notion, but I think Last of Us Part 2 is a fun game.
Yeah.
But it comes down to the fact that for me, like, what I take as fun is not going to be the same as what you take as fun, Tucker,
Yeah.
or where Sis Scott takes as fun. I like casual grinding, but not in JRPGs.
Yeah.
It was a good joke in the first version of the recording. I had to salvage it
Yeah.
and use it twice.
Yeah.
So I think an important thing, Tucker, is we're getting into this notion of, is fun good?
Yes.
What is fun for you in playing a game? And is fun sort of a limiting way to this is a leading question here. Get ready for this one. For you, Tucker Hazel, get ready for this one. Teeing up.
Yeah.
Get your bat out. Get ready. Is having fun the reason you play video games, or is that too narrow of a modus operandi for you?
Here's the answer.
Yeah.
No. I mean, I like the honest to God truth
Yeah.
is and what we're sort of going to be challenging and exploring today as we go through some of the submissions that we've gotten is that while everyone does have their own definition of fun, of what they personally find fun in a game,
Yeah.
and then obviously, as I said, that varies from person to person. There is a general concept of what fun is that is lighthearted, that makes you laugh, that doesn't stress you out too much. These are all things that I think most people can agree fit into this definition. And the reason why I say no to the reason I play video games is not to have fun is because for the most part, the things that a lot of people find fun about games, I don't find particularly fun. And so,
Give me some examples. Hit me with some examples. Sorry, I got a barcode stuck to my finger. Hit me with examples. Here.
you're different. You're like Agent 48. It's not on the
That's
back
true.
of your head. It's like on your finger. Some examples. I think a lot of people find the idea of improving their skill in a game
Sure.
to be something
Yeah.
very fun, to be very rewarding, to be something that they chase, that they can get easily sucked into, whether that is in a fighting game, being able to win more consistently,
Yeah.
do higher combos, or in a high score based game, getting a higher score, or being able to beat a game faster. All these things fall under a thing a lot of people would call fun, or in just the traditional sense of what a game is like you either want to win or you want to get better at it,
Yeah.
improve your skill at it. And that's not something that I almost ever find myself gearing to. And it can certainly mean that I have a difficult time sharing what I like about games with other people because they're like,
Yeah.
it doesn't really make a lot of sense. But that is something that I just have to wrestle with myself because it's not something that applies to a lot of people. So I understand I'm kind of alone there. But again, it's because everyone has a different definition of fun, and mine just happens to be more different than other people's.
Well, so here's what's interesting. I think this is like part of the quagmire we find ourselves in here. Word
Yeah.
of the day: quagmire,
Mhm.
silver dollar word. You play games. The reason I was like, it's leading questions because I knew your answer already. I knew that was going to be your answer. But more
Well,
specifically,
yeah, you've known me for like a decade. That's why.
this is true.
Yeah.
What I thought you were going to talk about is sort of your. Sorry, I had to burp. Forgive me, please. Please forgive me. I thought you were going to talk about this notion of like playing games for like a academic purpose,
Yeah,
or like growing your knowledge base, or things on that line. And I guess my question for you then, and this sort of underscores the issue, is that stuff fun? I.e., to give it like a more concrete example, you hate Kirby, or you don't hate Kirby. You would have dinner with Kirby if you knocked on your if Kirby was homeless and knocked on your door and was like, I need a place to stay tonight, you'd let him crash. We know that.
Depends on which iteration of Kirby.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm trying to engage with your bit. All right.
No, I was just thinking. No, it took me a second because I was like, well, because I would open the door to any version of Kirby.
Yeah, I know.
But you also have the benefit of Tucker has a secret room in the center of his house that he can trap people in.
Sure.
That's true.
Yeah.
So you hate Kirby games, but
Yes.
you depending on the type of Kirby, you might like him. When you're playing Kirby the Amazing Mirror, a game you don't like at all,
Yeah.
one of your least favorite games ever,
Yes.
but you're downloading knowledge into your brain
Yes.
about HAL Labs and about the Kirby series and Nintendo in general, are you having fun?
In that moment, no, because I hate that fucking game and it annoys me.
Sure. So, but was it enriching in some way?
Sure. Yeah, I guess so.
Because this is what I'm trying to get at here. Like, for me, a lot of what I find, the reason I play games really is mostly for the actual act of playing. Kind of what you were saying, you don't get the enjoyment out of, where two sides of the coin there.
Yeah.
Like, I like the act of playing. And so a lot of the games I play in that sense are archetypally fun.
Mhm.
We had another comment here from our friend Haganati. If I said that wrong, I apologize. And they mentioned that, quote, I've lost in Magic the Gathering, but I've had fun just because the way my opponent won was delightful.
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting idea, and that sort of seems to square with me as well, that, if I'm just interested in the notion of play, if I sit down and I'm playing Halo for a couple hours and I get my teeth kicked in because the skill-based matchmaking is too stringent, I'm still having fun.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to figure out, like, for myself, does that mean that my definition of fun is just like wide, or is it that I'm playing for something more, I'm playing something
Wider
different?
than mine or wider than
Wider than just saying I play games to have fun. Because I kind of feel like in some ways I when I go to the
See that?
gym, I'm not always having fun.
A
Jesse,
little white hand just came up and tapped.
Jesse's
me
got
right
some
in the shoulder.
thoughts.
hey, can I help? Can I contribute? No.
When I go to the gym, it's not necessarily fun to sit there and struggle my way through a set of reps on exercise I don't like. But I do it because, again, I like the act of it. I like the act of working out, just like I like the act of play. So it makes me wonder, really, if saying that I play games to have fun is even that accurate of a statement. And I think the reason I'm asking these questions about Kirby, not just if you would house him, but if you get some sort of stimulation out of playing his games, is like, is the answer for us maybe a truer answer to this notion of is fun good? Is, does it matter because I'm not playing games strictly for that? And fun is like a thing that passes me and I grab it. But I'm playing because I love the act of play. You love the act of
Hmm.
stimulating your mind and your knowledge base. Do you
Yeah.
understand what I'm getting at here? Does that make
Well,
sense?
the thing that I'm be curious to hear how you divide a definition
Yeah.
is the why would when is the active play not fun to you?
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because like
Because
in a,
I find it difficult to separate the two in my mind.
well, we got this comment here from Phil
Yeah.
that I thought was very interesting. And Phil says, fun is a vital component of entertainment media, but if the medium is overwhelmingly designed to instill fun without challenge and or even sadness at its finite nature, then gaming morphs from something fulfilling and nurturing to something draining and parasitic. The way I see
Hmm.
it, there's a theoretical, infinite fun game with 100% addictive gameplay loop that doesn't get old because the devs are constantly updating and improving it without radically changing the elements that gamers come hooked on. This infinite fun game has no appeal to me. I grew up on games that have jank. They were imperfect and frustrating sometimes by accident.
Hmm.
And it's an interesting idea because, like, if I just start thinking about some games that I really love,
Yeah.
like Super Monkey Ball and Super Monkey Ball 2,
Yeah.
there's a lot of really dumb horse shit in those games. Especially like if you're doing an expert run, you're gonna come across some levels where there's like geometry that's never existed before that is like moving at 5 million miles an hour and trying to
Yeah.
knock off the stage, and it really pisses me off when that happens.
Yeah.
That's not fun. It's not fun in the way that like swinging on a swing set is fun
Hmm.
because I think it's not necessarily just that the frustration is fun, but like the frustration is fulfilling. I think this idea that
Sure.
What Phil is saying here is that fun is in some ways maybe an immutable thing, and then there's other elements stirred into the pot there that is really what gives the playing of the game some kind of
Yeah.
meaning.
Sure.
Because I think if I was chasing fun, I wouldn't finish some of the games I finished. Like I just
Yeah.
beat Metroid Prime Hunters, and that was cool because it was like the last major Metroid game I'd not really put any time into.
Yeah.
But there's some shit in that game that really, 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 really pissed me off.
Yeah.
But I still did it because I think I enjoyed the act of doing it. I wasn't chasing like 6 hours of fun because I didn't have 6 hours of fun with that game.
Yeah.
So it just, I think maybe my view of it as we sort of get deeper in here is that maybe I'm not playing explicitly to have fun, and maybe
Mhm.
that's sort of part of the reason that I've always sided with Neil Druckmann on that quote, for instance.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I think what I end up finding interesting and simultaneously interesting and frustrating about
Yeah,
discussing games in an ecosystem where you and I exist very squarely in this industry based, very knowledgeable about the history of games, understanding of the culture
yeah,
area that does lean to all sorts of different directions, whether we agree with them or not. But then there's also what the wider video game player base is people that don't share though they don't share those same viewpoints, they don't
yeah,
maybe carry the same knowledge base, and it can create an interesting divide. But one thing that I find puts me more in the like theoretical industry camp is the idea of a game being gamey, and that being something that
oh,
most
sure,
people pursue in games. And in my mind, gaminess, and the way that a lot of people use that word, is pretty much analogous to fun. Is it really about a set of mechanics that physics and bouncing around and
yeah,
being able to gain your skill and whatever it is, like about something being more not equitable, more similar to, I guess, a non-video game. And this is
sure,
actually something that our friend Steven mentioned, is that games are largely or video games are largely defined by their association to other games, traditional games that aren't electronic. Let's see, where did he say that? He said, I think the existence of games, both linguistically and ontologically, is tied directly to the idea of fun. This means that they exist in relation to it. But they also can deny it and obfuscate fun. But this is still an engagement with fun.
that's an interesting idea.
Yeah, and what do you think of that?
Well, I mean, I think that yeah, they can exists in relation to it. They can deny and obfuscate fun, but this is an engagement with fun. Yeah. Well, it actually it dovetails just I think a short thing from our friend Franz here as well, who says that if a game is not fun somehow, like if it's just boring, that's definitely a problem. Um, but as he continues on here later, the thing is that most games have highs and lows. For example, the grindy section I find more and more I pass the time in by watching something else on my side monitor just to get back to the good part. For example, new part of the story or new location.
Yeah.
It's an interesting idea because I think that Franz is sort of describing the experience actually of what Stephen is talking about in part. And again, it goes to what Phil was saying also, this notion that we're not operating solely on this one note of fun. And I like the way that Franz framed it, that there's this ebbs and flows on a player side. Mm-hmm. And what Stephen is making me think of here is the idea that these ebbs and flows are tied to like a IV drip of fun. Mm-hmm. And knowing when to lean into the fun, or as he's saying here, when to deny or to obfuscate it.
Sure.
And I guess that is, if I think about Monkey Ball again, that's certainly true.
Yeah.
You have these really, really, really dumb, pain in the ass, annoying stages, and then you have the ones you just can blow through and build your confidence, or ones that like the back of your hand you can pull a trick off in, and that might actually be sort of again a reframing as I'm trying to figure out for my own self. My playing games to have fun. This might be getting me closer to my answer. This notion that, well, I'm still in the area of fun. I'm never straying totally from it. Mm-hmm. I think that's an interesting thing that Stephen is suggesting here, because at the beginning of his portion of what he submitted, he said, fun is certainly seen as a base requirement for games, and is perhaps endemic due to the history of the medium and the word itself.
Yeah.
The medium is perhaps etymologically constrained due to the direct connotation of the game being something that is fun.
Yeah. And that's definitely, I should have read that quote instead of
I think both were really important.
Yeah. Because if you go back to the origins of electronic entertainment, it is trying to take an arcade game or pinball game, something like that, and translate it in some way, whether that is a sport or the idea of high score chasing coming from something like pinball, and turning it into something that is digitally recreated. There are a lot of early sports games. Obviously, Pong is a sports game. Racing is a real life sport. And so it's like, how can we digitize something that is otherwise a real sport or a game? Backgammon, chess, tic-tac-toe, tennis, all of these things. And almost all of those real life games, I mean, I don't know, I'm not particularly strongly familiar with any of them, but almost all of them are recreational. They're pastimes. They're relaxing. There's something that stimulates your mind, but that you don't have to take particularly seriously in order to enjoy. And when games started off and they were just digitizations of real life games, then there was obviously there wasn't the vocabulary or the knowledge of the industry or the medium to be able to say they're not that, because they all were that for a certain period of time. And I do still think that many people carry that with them, of the intent of a game is to recreate something that is to like mirror this thing that you could do in real life in some way, but is digitally recreated. And then, like, that's just meant for fun. It's a pastime. It's a silly thing. And as the medium has evolved, I think more and more creators have found that the digital interactive medium can be used to do a much wider variety of things. And that where gaminess and fun were the initial intent, the medium has fractaled to have a lot on offer that isn't exactly that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really, really, really interesting idea, I think. Because you're totally right. I mean, Pong and tennis for two, if you go even further back, it's always been, as you're saying, about this recreation.
Yeah.
And that's
Pac-Man happened to me the other day in real life. I know a guy that went through Donkey Kong.
It's an interesting idea because, like, something I think about sometimes is, like, I can't really think of, although my knowledge of very early Hollywood is certainly not what yours is. So you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I just feel like this is such a this notion of a deviation in games, the notion of a deviation from fun being some kind of issue. I
Mhm.
just don't feel it's something that's necessarily plagued other mediums of art. You think
Yeah,
that's fair?
for film, it definitely did. I mean, really early film
Sure.
was it was a scientific thing. It was
Sure.
it used to just observe like physical movements of people or
Yeah.
animals, or to like literally just capture a slice of a different place and then be able to recreate and show that to other people in other places. There wasn't the concept of narrative, and it wasn't until 15 years or something
Yeah.
into the history of film as something that exists, where you get storytelling being told, or the idea of using editing to create visual tricks or things. That's sort
Sure.
of the evolution I think we can kind of mirror of games of early films were much more basically like photographs, right? It was a
Yeah.
moving image. It was, we know what a photograph is. Let's use or drawing, photograph, film. Let's use film just be like basically recreate what we would do with a photograph, but obviously with a little bit more detail and potential. But then film evolved into its own when the concepts of editing and storytelling through editing and cross-cutting and all of these concepts became
Yeah.
generally understood. And we're still, I think we're much farther into that than, it's not like it's 1902 right now for video
Right.
games, but there definitely was the first, I don't know, I would say 15, 20 years of the video games industry that was very much analogous to that early cinema,
Yeah.
pre-film in the way that we understand it.
Yeah, I mean that's I guess what it makes me think about still though is like you think about really early photojournalism even that was happening sort of concurrent in the depression era, for instance, sort of
Mhm.
as film is developing still, right? Uh, uh, as a medium, like the notion of photography, of capturing an image and transporting the viewer into that image, even if you're thinking pre-narrative film as you're explaining to me, like even narrative film is capturing as a scientific piece of scientific film would be the ability to see something that
Yeah.
you are not seeing in front of you outside of the screen.
Yeah.
Or like we think about, if we even jump forward in time, not a ton, but we jump forward to like Around the World in 80 Days, winning Best Picture, right? And we talk on Quest about the idea of like this is from a modern lens a deeply racist film, but
Yes.
moreover, it's a film that would have been intriguing to people who couldn't sort of experience the breadth of the world
Yeah.
in their regular life, and
Who
so
would
this is
never
sort of
viewed other cultures, other places.
yeah. So I guess my point in part,
Especially not in wonderful Technicolor.
certainly not. I guess my point in part is like I think the challenges you're describing about like a resistance to or a need to come to grips with the notion of narrative filmmaking
Yeah.
is like a little bit different because the notion was always to present an image to the viewer and to convey something through the image that they couldn't understand otherwise.
Yeah.
And like that's a pretty flexible
When I watch
concept.
Megalopolis, I still can't understand it.
That's a great point. That's a great point. I could, but I fell off of a couch when I was 6 months old. My dad thought I was dead, so that probably scrambled.
That's true. Jesus
Yes, that's true.
Christ.
I guess I fell off the couch and just lay there for like a couple seconds, and I just got up and I was okay. But
Your dad had really low confidence in like your constitution there.
oh, but think about it. If your kid falls off the couch and even if for 5 seconds they're just still on the ground,
That's true. Yeah.
But if we're thinking about this, because Tucker, this is such an interesting idea you've brought up here.
Yeah.
If you're thinking about this notion that the initial intention of video games was something indeed far narrower than what photography, even early photography was trying to achieve, and early videography and everything was trying to achieve. It places a much more restrictive sort of outer bounds on what a game to some people can be and can do. And obviously it's something you challenge a lot, but it's interesting to like think through a historical lens that there's some kind of fundamental precedent for why people
Yeah.
like gamey things.
Sure. Yeah.
And
And to be clear, I think the
Yeah.
reason why that is still something that persists and why the quote that Neil Druckmann said got a lot of pushback from people,
Yeah.
and like, oh, this isn't what games really should be, is because most of the most popular games, obviously the concepts within them have greatly evolved over the course of 40 years, but the reason that most people play games
Yeah.
play video games is in quite parallel to why someone would play a real life game.
Right.
Is relaxing, is enjoyment, is just being just general entertainment without much necessarily like deeper or different artistic value. And so when people see something that's like that, frankly, is a game that's a little bit more cinematic or is
Yeah.
more tonally serious or more thematically complex, it is antithetical to what they understand games to be. And so then there's the pushback of, no, games aren't, this is not what games are. Like this is something different.
I mean, it risks a different conversation, but I think it's part of the weakness of the medium on the whole being called video games.
Sure. I would agree. No,
Opposed,
that's not something I have any interest in trying to
no.
push back against. That would be the fucking lamest, least. That'd be the worst use of my energy I could possibly do.
Yeah, 100%. But it's interesting. I think the way you're making me think about recreational games. Even if you think about like cornhole, I love cornhole, right? You
Sure.
can get pretty pissed off playing cornhole. You know, you're at a wedding or something, and you're playing against your sister, and she's beating you at cornhole. You kind of get mad at your aunt's wedding when you're playing cornhole against your sister. It could happen to anybody. So it's interesting because, or think about tennis. This is because we're talking about how really the revolution of Pong is, I think, sort of, it's a lot, we've lost sight in some ways of how important Pong was and how ubiquitous Pong was, how literally even Nintendo just made their own version of Pong.
Sure.
If we're taking that as like as what it was, which was a digital version of tennis, I used to play tennis, and tennis was really engaging for me. It wasn't always fun, but I was deeply engaged by the act of playing it.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be quite frustrating, and it could be quite technical. And you know, you get there and you're playing a match against an opponent who is your level or better, and suddenly you're thinking about your physical
my level or worse, but you know.
For you, of course. You're thinking about your physical dexterity, you're thinking about your strategic mindset.
Yeah.
And suddenly it's leisure in a manner of speaking.
Yeah.
But it's something really engaged on a reflex level, on like a visceral level like that. And so I think what you're proposing is that we start to put barriers in games. And I don't mean barriers here, it's not my perspective, but in a very literal sense.
Yeah.
A barrier. It's like if I was watching, you know, the worst parts of playing tennis was when there'd be a changeover and you'd be waiting for a couple minutes before you get back onto the court.
What do they do in that time?
Oh, you talk to your coach for a minute, you get a drink of water,
Okay.
you get a new can of balls.
It's like a break. Okay. I thought they'd like change something about the court. I'm like, it's
no,
just
every couple of sets you would change what side of the court you're on.
Yeah.
And so, in a manner of speaking, cutscenes sort of become that, right?
Sure.
But for longer.
That's what pacing is in video games.
Yeah.
And as I've done Dev Dive more and more, I've had these conversations. I actually did with Remy Sue, who made 1,000 Times Resist. That was last week's Dev Dive, about the idea of pacing, and that being very different in different kinds of games where you can utilize different game design techniques to pace the engagement of a player, because it can be very exhausting to be engagement wise like turned on all the time, and like having to be like have your mind operating at 100%. And so you have moments, whether it is cutscenes or puzzles or variants in gameplay or just like a slower section, where you're able to bring it down and then bring it back up and bring it down. Balance is very key in I guess I never really thought about it that way, but also in real life sports and games as well.
100%. And I guess
that's why they have the intermission in poker.
That's true. It's true. It's true.
And Go Fish.
And imagine if you played a hand of Go Fish and then there's like a 15-minute cutscene.
Yeah. Well, and you did it. You actually pointed the exact reason why I think people associate fun or have such an issue with games evolving in the way that they do, is they associate doing a video game like playing Go Fish or fucking Jackers or Checkers or whatever the shit. And like, so the idea of inserting something that is not that into the experience,
Yeah.
people find very challenging and off-putting to some degree, and some people, of course. But I know you were making a joke with that, but that, in my mind, it's a very reductive version, but like, that's how kind of stupid in my mind I see that argument as, like,
Sure.
but there are people who genuinely do feel that way, and I think
Yeah.
it's kind of analogous.
I mean, I guess it goes back a little bit to what I've been trying to figure out, and I guess it begs the question for me in a general sense: why would I even put going to the gym and playing a game in conversation?
Yeah.
But I guess for me, it's because like on some sort of underlying level, the games I really love to play, they're similar. There's about developing a skill.
Exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And developing it sort of and being challenged in the development of it, but having that really be directed by me. I mean, I'm not going to the gym and I've got a fucking personal trainer there and they're telling me, okay, you're gonna do this and you're gonna do that and you're gonna do this and you're gonna do that. I think that's maybe hidden in there in this conversation we're having here is like, to me, I view games in a more like physical way. Again, it goes back to my notion from the beginning of playing for the act of play.
I would agree. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then
I would agree. You think that? Yes.
it makes me wonder here about something Murph said.
Yeah. Murph, by the way, Murph's response. I love to pick favorites. This is my favorite of all of this. I can't wait to have children so I can pick a favorite and just so
yeah, you're gonna have one child and tell your wife, like, we got to have another one so I can choose which one I like more. I wonder how many people use that as a reason to have a second child. Probably few.
I would frankly hope few.
Fun is how you trick gamers into feeling new emotions. In Steven's example, which we didn't read out, but contextual clues here, piece it together. Papers, Please makes bureaucracy fun, and by doing so, it gets you in the headspace of the kind of useful tools fascist regimes love. It also works in the inverse, but requires hardier souls.
What the hell does that mean?
Pathologic, for example, is not fun, but it's not supposed to be, because surviving penniless during a plague in a remote village is not fun.
Okay, well, suit yourself.
The flip side is that some capital G gamers get in this mindset that fun is a dragon they have to chase, and if the game is quote unquote not fun, it's therefore quote unquote not a good game.
Exactly. Yep. Mm-hmm.
I think we find different parts of this submission compelling, and I think that's why it makes it's a good submission. We could have said fuck everybody else. We're just gonna use Murph's submission.
Yeah.
This notion of fun.
By the way, I proposed that before we started the video, but Abram said.
This notion of fun being how you trick gamers into feeling new emotions is an interesting idea, because I think it goes back again to sort of this difference I was trying to draw between the idea of sort of the progression and acceptance of different modes of photography and filmmaking, etc. The differences between that and accepting the changes in gameplay, whereas in one you're a passive observer and sort of the implicit function is always to learn or experience something different, or where you're an active participant and you have a certain you're arriving at the piece of work with a sort of a certain sense in your mind of how you should interface with it. Murph's idea of like understanding that and subverting it is quite cool. I think The Last of Us Part 2 does an amazing job at this.
Yeah, well, I think the difference where I would maybe change like a word in what he said there is interactivity is how you trick gamers into feeling new emotions. Because and to Murph's credit, what we've been saying a lot today is that people associate interactivity or choice and something being fun. That's kind of been exploring a lot today. But why I would stipulate interactivity is because it is in Papers, Please, it's the idea of making these choices that you then can find fun. I don't know if I necessarily find Papers, Please particularly fun in that same sense, but it's the idea of making those decisions, those interactive decisions that then create an emotion in your head, like, this is kind of what it would be like to do blank. Or in Last of Us Part 2, one of the reasons why I find that game artistically and thematically engaging is because it does force you to make choices, and it plays with the idea of choice, or why I love the Stanley Parable, right?
Yeah.
Of these games that use interactivity to make a point about choice and choice in people's minds. And in the case of Stanley Parable, it's like literally which choice you make. But
Mhm.
in The Last of Us, it's when can you make choices and when can you not? And
Yeah.
that forces you to feel different emotions based on the storytelling of the developer. And a lot of people find a choice or interactivity to be the one thing that games offer, and I do agree with that. But to the point that I don't know, someone said like when you're challenging or challenging interactivity, that's where some interesting stuff can happen.
Yeah.
That's what I think Last of Us 2 does. Is it says no, making a choice isn't always the right solution for an interesting story. There is some interesting value in stripping away player choice and forcing them to experience something and introducing that and taking that away and putting it back in different parts of the game to create different emotions at different times.
It does, and I agree with you entirely. I mean, that's why I think that is among maybe the 10 best games ever. But I also
Yeah.
think that it's funny, there's sort of an interesting small bit of Last of Us 2 discourse on Twitter recently because a clip of the combat went mega viral.
Yeah.
Um,
It was like, look how sick ass this gameplay is. Goddamn.
yeah, and it is. I mean, I think that's part of why The Last of Us is so nefariously brilliant.
Yeah.
Because the combat in that game is, I think, about as brutal as combat has ever gotten in any game, period. The way you can literally blow someone's face off, or the way that Ellie slits somebody's throat open, the way you shoot somebody in the leg and they fall down on that leg. There's just there's so much attention to the grotesque in that game, but in a way that kind of builds on what is archetypally fun, going back to Doom and going back to the games of its era, right? As a shooter, Last of Us Part 2 is extremely, extremely successful.
Yeah.
And I think it actually dovetails nicely with what Murph is saying here in a more literal sense. Instead of not even I fucking hate when you scratch your shoulder at the same time I scratch my shoulder. We gotta take turns.
Has that happened quite frequently?
I don't know. I have no idea. Where you don't even have to change the word here. Like, I think the gameplay of Last of Us Part 2 is just fun.
Sure.
I think that that they know how to pull the right levers, the way how to make the guns feel good, the sound of the water bottle silencer or anything in there. It is archetypally fun. But because that level of real graphic grounded hyperviolence is fun, it makes the questions you're raising, what the game does on a narrative level, I think even more potent. And ties the gameplay and narrative together really well. So I think that in some ways it's like the game is like a Trojan horse of using fun in a literal way to craft some kind of new meaning.
Yeah.
And
trick gamers into feeling new emotions, maybe.
Exactly. I think that's a really, really astute point. Spec Ops: The Line did the same thing before it. Both very, very, very good games, very similar games.
Yeah.
This notion that Murph also has about finding a game quote unquote not fun, but then being quote unquote not good, is obviously flawed and obviously what we're sort of trying to discuss. But it's hard because, like, how do you class that? And I think that goes back to the issue we've been having this whole time. But when people say that a game isn't fun on sort of like a wide scale, because certainly that becomes a criticism against games and sort of popular conversation.
Yeah,
I guess it's like what do they mean? Do you think it all is just coming back to this notion of expecting a as you're saying, a real world game and not getting that? Because I think there's a lot of gameplay forward games also that people say that aren't fun. Of course,
yeah, totally, yeah. Because it's also about game design success and prowess and things that it takes a real skill to deliver on the how satisfying the driving mechanics in a racing game are, or the physics in a sports game or something like that. There's a craft to that, and you can make a bad sports game even though it's gameplay focused. There can be bad gameplay and bad sports style, game style interactivity. That's totally possible.
Yeah.
But I also do think that it is, again, to the point of everyone having a different definition of fun.
Yeah.
There's this generalized complaint of some games are not fun, but that is obviously an incredibly subjective thing. There is a lot of times where someone who is not into strategy games, not
Yeah.
into like cozy, like slower games, not into a visual novel, not into a puzzle game, where their criticism of why they don't enjoy that game is because it is not fun. Like blank is boring. This is not interesting to me. I do not find this engaging, and you can boil that down to this isn't fun. And I've certainly have levied that critique against games that are widely considered to be very fun, but when I play them, I do not enjoy the mechanics. I do not enjoy the gunplay or the physics or X, Y, and Z. And so my criticism is this isn't fun. That isn't like right or wrong. It's an emotional reaction to it because everyone has a different sense of what they find fun.
Yeah. I mean, it just becomes interesting, I think, when enough people coalesce around that criticism that it becomes a consensus. And to that end, I don't even really know what to make of that idea necessarily, because I think as we're sort of have been building on this notion of real hyper-subjectivity in fun, which I think there's more subjectivity in that than a lot of qualifiers people are going to give a game. It makes me wonder, like, what's the pattern? And I really keep coming back to this idea that you've shared, that games on an intrinsic level, that you and Stephen have been building on this intrinsic level, they are supposed to dance with fun.
Sure.
And if you ice people out of that fun for too long, then they're going to think it's not fun.
Yeah.
And I think that can be done through cutscenes, but it can be done other ways too. I mean, if you just have a really, think about just like games that are really boring in their first 5 hours or so.
Sure.
I think about a lot of part of my issue I have with getting into a lot of JRPGs is, you're going to have to probably go through a 5-7 hour chunk that is just boring. It's just teaching you stuff, right?
Yeah.
And like that's the worst part of learning anything. It's the worst part of trying to figure out a new sport when you're your coach. You go back to tennis when your coach is like, today you're just going to drill. You're going to drill doing volleys. You're going to stand at that net for this whole hour practice, and you're going to hit volleys until you're better at it. That's not really fun. Mm-hmm. And so I think it also returns to your point of pacing, your point about your conversation with Remy. Like, you have to be aware of that, and you have to give people that fun. But then this is why I just find the conversation so interesting, because how do you as a designer say, okay, yeah, that's going to be fun. That's the fun thing we put in here.
Yeah, I mean, well, that the interesting and exciting part is of why we're able to make such a variety of games that such a variety of people find fun is because there's a variety of people making games that find different things fun. Is when someone's making a visual novel, their goal is to have someone experience this story that they have written, and whatever amount of interactivity that has or doesn't have is obviously up to the designer's choice, but they want them to enjoy that story, because as they are writing it, if it's something like maybe they're just really into storytelling or really into character writing, and they find that process fun, and they want to share that with someone else, and they want someone else to experience the story as it is written, because that engages them and can be entertaining in different ways. But someone like you, who's not particularly a story-first guy in your games, and enjoys that active play that a visual novel doesn't really have, you would sit there and you'd play, Phoenix Wright or whatever the fuck, or some goddamn hentai game, and you'd sit there and you'd be like, well, okay, you might find that fun, but you'd sit there and you'd be like, well, this isn't fun.
Yeah.
But that's because your idea of fun does not align with the designer's idea of fun.
Let's think about the inverse also, though. Let's think about the biggest games in the world. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Think about being at Guerrilla and making Horizon, right?
Yeah.
You're tasked with making this game that, as we know now, would go on to sell 20 million some odd copies. It would be sort of a headlining IP.
Yeah.
There's no doubt that in the process of making that game, they had some indication that at least Sony was going to position it like that. And they had to make this big AAA action game that anybody could pick up and enjoy.
Yeah.
And then there sort of becomes like it has to be some sort of like mathematical approach to the fun in a way.
Well, no,
Because
definitely, but that comes to playtesting. That
yeah,
comes to analysis from a game design perspective of heat mapping different elements of what do players engage with, and that is something that I think some people can, rightfully or not, use as a criticism against certain games like Call of Duty or Fortnite, or these games that are made for quote unquote the lowest common denominator.
yeah,
But where I understand the struggle from the game designer's perspective is their goal is to have as many people who like this kind of game
right.
to have as much fun and engage with it on as deep a level for as long as they can. And so you do heat mapping. You do gear a Far Cry or a Call of Duty towards the quote unquote lowest common denominator, because that means that everyone above that common denominator can have a similar degree of engagement and fun. And someone might say, like, I want something to be a little bit more niche, a little bit more unique, and I totally understand that and certainly find enjoyment of that in myself. But I also understand why you would want to heat map something, why you would want to dumb something down or boil something down, because you want as much people as possible to engage with it. That can be your goal or it cannot, but I think both are equally interesting and valid, personally.
Yeah, I mean, we'll take it back also to this again. I can't get this idea out of my head. This notion that video games are literally physical games, and the intent was to mirror them. You know, think about physical activity again. I think pretty much anybody can have fun with can have fun playing dodgeball, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
I think with rare exception, everybody in school, when I was from kindergarten to high school, whenever there was a game of dodgeball, everybody was having fun.
Yeah.
Weightlifting, not fun for everybody.
Yeah.
You know, going and trekking, not fun for everybody.
Yeah. Chess, not fun for everyone.
Yeah, there are physical games that are ubiquitously fun, and there's physical games that certainly are not.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, you look at a game like COD, and it'd be almost a funny exercise to be like, okay, so what real world game is this?
Yeah, I mean, I guess paintball is the closest thing you're gonna get.
Yeah, and like or dodgeball. Again, everybody loves dodgeball.
Depends on if you just see real life war as a game.
True.
Political game.
That's Tucker.
Whoa.
Well, look at my hair standing on end after you said that.
Wow, such goosebumps.
I guess what I'm saying, in articulately, is I think that there is this is part of why.
Sorry. I was just like, okay, I'm going to associate other games with real life things, and like, what's Donkey Kong? I don't know, just the idea of like pretending to be a monkey when you're a child. Go. That's what makes Donkey Kong so fun.
I would think about like you know you get your sleeping bag and you put it in like the little sleeping bag carrier, and it looks like a barrel.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think about like if I was on the stairs behind somebody.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, wouldn't it be fun to pick up the sleeping bag like it's a Donkey Kong barrel and throw it at the person lower on the stairs?
But I mean, that's life imitates art in a way, you know?
I think so. Yeah.
But do you think chucking something at chucking someone
try again
chucking something at someone when they're on the stairs, that probably had like if you had a Google heat map, that probably massively spiked after the release of Donkey Kong.
Oh, like just like how often people did it.
Yes.
Yeah, probably. I would say so.
Barrel related accidents, massive spike after the release of Donkey Kong.
Fuck was I trying to say? Right, I was trying to say, I think this is part of what makes the beauty of AAA games. Part of the beauty of AAA games is this, and I think it's something that people don't appreciate enough.
Yeah,
like I think about everybody who complains about Atreus or Aloy, in Ragnarok or Wild West, whatever the second game was called, Forbidden West. Like being like, I think that the puzzle solution is insert puzzle solution in dialogue.
Yeah.
I think that people you can look at that and be like, oh, it's lazy and it takes me out of the experience. But I think moreover, it's what you're talking about. It is this real concern for making sure that the fun is never too far away and that the struggle is manageable. And
it's a highly tested pacing concern.
Yeah, and that's
pacing design choice is what I should have said. Yeah,
100%. And like, there's games that don't do that. there's From made their name off of going in the opposite direction of that.
Yes.
And that's cool. And it's cool to say, okay, well, we know that there's a lot of players that indeed don't find that fun, and they exist around that heat map.
Yeah.
And we're going to make something for them, and then they are the heat map.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's quite interesting. This idea of like engineering for maximal fun in the person you think is going to buy your game is a fascinating one.
Yeah.
And it's a necessary concern. I think what we're getting at, if nothing else, is that fun is a necessary part of the game, of any game. I think it just in a literal sense, it in some capacity, even the decision to say we're going to make something that is not fun.
Yeah.
First of all, I don't think there's many designers doing that, even if it's not, not fun for a ton of people. Fine, but there's an audience you're targeting that's going to have fun with your game.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So this notion that
but you know what that does though is that does challenge, and I think rightfully so, what I said at the beginning when I said my goal when I play games is not to have fun. That, I mean, to a certain level, I don't think that even can be true, because it just means that the way that I am engaging with a game, especially my favorite games, is in a different type of fun than what we started at the beginning. There's a general concept of what is fun.
Yeah.
Mine differs from that, but that doesn't mean what I'm experiencing isn't fun to me.
Yeah, it also doesn't mean that you know, because here's the thing: you're playing some of those.
Insult me.
Yeah, that insert whatever insult. It can be fucking. There's 10 different insults I could have picked. You leave it in the comments which insult I should have said.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what else do you want to explore here, really, in this conversation?
I think it might be interesting to pick a couple of games and think about different elements of them, of why certain people might find parts of them fun or not fun, that are intentionally made by the developers. We've talked a little bit about some arcade games. We've talked a little bit about like the difficulty of from software game and why someone might find that engaging. But are there any other types of games that you want to explore where their fun lies, or the audience that finds them fun lies? And while you think about that, I'm gonna go let the cat out.
You let Jesse out. Jesse's been having a field day in the recording here. Games that I want to think about if they're fun or not. I don't know. Here's an interesting one.
Yeah.
Animal Crossing.
I'm looking at my top 100 games list. New Horizons came out at me as if in a dream, and I'm like, I must discuss this.
Yeah, I was just looking in my room, and it's like, what do I see here?
Yeah.
I see Slippy Toad.
Yeah.
And I saw my Animal Crossing amiibo over there. I'm like, okay, that's the ticket.
Yeah.
I mean, Animal Crossing, it's interesting because, I mean, this also invites. Well, it's funny because I feel like we've in some ways had this conversation already. When Dragon's
in this video or other one? Oh, the friction video.
Yeah, when Dragon's Dogma came out last year. But like when you're looking at Animal Crossing, really pre New Leaf, but in a more general way, really even just pre New Horizons, the amount of sort of barriers and guardrails around the player was so much higher than what the later games offered, particularly New Horizons.
Yeah.
I think part of what made it hard for me to get into New Horizons is that the parameters of fun changed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Suddenly, I think part of it actually is that suddenly fun was always around the corner. To me, part of what made Animal Crossing really interesting was that there was sometimes when there was nothing fun to do. Yeah. Like there's how many more fish can I go catch? I went around, I talked to my villagers, I went to the shops, I did my little activities. I did it, right?
Figure something out, yeah.
And I think New Horizons sort of illustrates sort of a shift that Nintendo EPD5 recognized of like, well, people, it goes back to your point of that really real careful planning and consideration for people are going to find fun, but thinking, okay, well, we're going to change the parameters so the fun is the ability to do whatever you want here on your island, and the friction or the insert whatever the barrier between you and the fun is the doing,
Mhm.
the building, the
Yeah.
slowly terraforming and all
Mhm.
this stuff. I think Animal Crossing is a really interesting example of the relation between the developer and the game and the game and the player
Yeah.
and fun at every level of that interaction.
Yeah. I definitely think Nintendo is a very interesting case example in being able to, across not only all their series and genres that they've tackled, but across the history of all of their series for the most part, of finding and targeting different types of fun that can appeal to different players.
Yeah.
And that is what can create a really passionate and frankly sometimes annoying argument and debate within Nintendo's series of which styles of games people
Yeah.
prefer.
Yeah.
Whether that is Animal Crossing, as you mentioned, I think that's a very key example where the traditional pre-New Horizons Animal Crossing style of having things that you had less control over was something that had built up a passionate fan base. But I think I don't know if this specifically. I'm kind of recalling some developer interviews around for that game of they felt that they had exhausted that concept and wanted to try something new that could engage a different type of
Yeah.
player. And I think whether you like it or not, I think they would definitely succeed with that in changing what Animal Crossing was on a moment to moment player basis,
Yeah.
and finding, frankly, much greater success because of that. No Animal Crossing pre-New Horizons has been nominated for Game of the Year. No Animal Crossing had sold anywhere near fucking like 50 million copies or whatever the hell it's at now. They found a type of gameplay that does engage a lot more people. Not necessarily that is a good or bad thing, but it did result in more people finding Animal Crossing more fun. And Zelda is also another example of that, where traditional high barrier Zelda design, dungeon
Yeah.
design, progression was completely eschewed in Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, and even Echoes of Wisdom, where there creates this very interesting divide between the appeals of what Zelda is. I think there's a shared appeal in pre Breath of the Wild Zelda, post Breath of the Wild Zelda. Like underlying the whole Zelda series is a certain philosophy, and there's different pillars built on top of that. And also pre New Horizons, post New Horizons. Obviously, we haven't seen other games since then, but there are these appeals. But then they're able to like fractal them and appeal to different subsets of that niche with different types of gameplay. And Nintendo, I think, has been really good at that, of trying different things within their series to make it speak to different kinds of players.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about Pikmin, it's another one I've drawn a conversation here.
Sure.
Because, the Ask the Developer interviews for Pikmin 4, I think, are some of the most interesting we've ever gotten, in which Miyamoto is sort of stumped. He's like, well, we always thought Pikmin should be a lot more popular than it is. And you can see on a gameplay level exactly the same as really what you're talking about with Zelda, I think is the closest analog of the ones you talked about. Them saying, well, there's some problems here in the formula here. There's too much friction. It's a little hard to grasp if you're not a veteran player. Let's simplify this a little bit. Let's have a different system for how you lock onto things. Let's put the camera in a different place. Let's change the amounts of Pikmin you can have out with you. Let's do all these things. Let's do all these things in the interest of changing that relationship between the fun parts and the frustrating parts.
Yeah.
Because even playing, I've been playing Pikmin 3 Deluxe with Jean, and it's been a blast playing in co-op, but playing after Pikmin 4 is so interesting, and seeing... And Pikmin 3 is certainly the most forgiving and friendly and accessible of the original trilogy Pikmin games.
Yeah.
But even just looking there and being like, there's a lot of annoying shit here. I'm fighting these bosses, and they're up above me, and they're hard to, get my Pikmin on, and to me that's fun. Again, the act of playing Pikmin is fun to me, but I can see where they say, well, we gotta tune this differently, and they tune it differently, and it's the biggest game in the series now by it's a small series, but for its series, a significant margin.
Of course, yeah.
And I also think about, in a more general way, I think about the opening to the E3 2017 presentation, and Reggie famously, what does he come out and say?
If the game isn't fun, why bother?
Yeah, he goes, the game is fun. If it's not fun, why bother?
Yeah.
And it's interesting because that quote is always, whenever that Neil Druckmann quote was brought up, that was always in the replies.
Yeah, of course it was.
And
the paramours of good and evil in the gaming industry.
yeah, and it's interesting because I think that Nintendo, I think a change in Nintendo, modern Nintendo to older eras of Nintendo is a willingness to design in a way that lets you play with only the highs. Like I think about, for instance, if you think about like New Super Mario Brothers Wii,
yeah,
when they introduced what's it called, Luigi mode, whatever it was, Luigi Helper mode. If you died enough times on a stage, you could just use Luigi Helper mode and he'd beat the stage for you.
Yeah,
that sort of was a turning point in a lot of ways for this being a mechanic that suddenly became a lot more ubiquitous in basically all Mario games and etc. Extended beyond Mario, even I was in Donkey Kong Country Returns HD, I kept fucking up, and then they'd be like, "Hey, do you want Super Donkey Kong to beat the stage?" I'm like, "No, I don't." But
is that a thing? Super Donkey? What does he look different? I haven't seen that.
I don't remember if his name is Super Donkey Kong. You'd have to look up like Donkey Kong Country Returns HD, like helper, like auto beat level Donkey Kong. Died. Now it's Mega Donkey Kong.
Whatever, I'll figure it out later. Yeah, I can ask Dan Farr.
It's interesting the ways that, you know, Nintendo sort of introduces these meta systems to kind of let you be not the developer, but the pacemaker in some ways.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
You know, if you feel, oh shit, I'm stuck here, well, there you go. You don't have to be stuck anymore. And it's an interesting approach, and it's still not one that's particularly common.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't really know where I'm going with that. I just think that's an interesting complication. This notion of, well, if you don't like the highs and lows, just have the highs.
Yeah. Yeah, and that is the most fascinating part about the variety of, especially people in like our community, but also in gaming at large, the variety of people that find different elements fun, because you will get a 3-hour video essay or a 5-hour Discord argument between people that are more hardcore into games and might find, like Steven or Brendan or some of our other friends do, certain elements of game design that have a little bit more friction to them to be why games are fun to them. And whether that is them complimenting the games that they love for those particular reasons, or rightfully or not criticizing games like Spider-Man 2, which is something that I heard a lot of criticism against for its low friction. But the other side of the coin is that those exact same level of passionate arguments will be made for the positive and negative benefits of the other side of the coin. And I do want to sort of wrap things back around to where some people will criticize games for not being gamey, which is usually in taking away player control, whether that's through a cutscene or through, slower walk and talk gameplay, whatever.
Yeah.
Or even something that's just like a walking simulator that has a low variety of player input options, where someone would criticize that. But where I find, not only because I enjoy those games, but artistically I find those very interesting, from a walking simulator to something like Detroit or a God of War that is much more predicated on its narrative, because what a lot of people find fun in a game is being told an engaging story, and whether that is an engaging story that is placed solely through gameplay that you find very, very compelling, or through one that has less interactivity but that you still find the story equally engaging, that is still fun. Even if it is not directly giving you choice or directly giving you interactivity, these games can be like fascinating. Sam Barlow's games are a good example because there is interactivity, but the pool of interactivity you're working within is very small, actually, because the goal of Immortality is to see all the clips.
Yeah.
How you get there is your own choice, but you're going to see the same content, whether you like it or not. And so it creates this interesting balance between is this a game, or how gamey is this? Because you're watching clips and the level of interactivity is relatively low, but it still can be very engaging, as you and I found, with especially Immortality. because it is written in an interesting way. And I think writing is a core part of games that a lot of people underplay that can be very, very engaging to a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, our good friend Andrew Roscoe of My Star Wars Show fame, it's back. Go watch the Skeleton Crew episode. It's a great show. Said here, one of my favorite games of all time is Last of Us Part 2. That's not a game I would call fun. It is emotionally exhausting and harrowing, but the experience and story is captivating and mesmerizing, and those things can make a game remarkable and entertaining.
Yeah.
Games like Last of Us 2 and Death Stranding, these games are not played with the intention of fun for me, but simply to experience a narrative with some kind of interaction.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's I like ending on what you said and what Andrea said here also, because I think in some ways, is it fun or not is just a shorthand for, or it's a shorthand for, did you the experience mean something to you or not? I feel
Sure.
a lot of times.
Yeah.
Like the amount of things you can put into this notion of fun is incredible. I mean, we're talking about narrative pacing. We're talking about gameplay friction. We're talking about difficulty. Yeah. We're talking about...
I think you can also put aesthetics in there. I think you can put music in there. Like some of my favorite games, like Neva last year, I think is fine on a gameplay level. But every time I walked into a new area and saw the way that they balanced color palettes and use of foreground and background, my fucking butt was kicked to the goddamn moon. I'm like, nobody's doing it like these guys. And it's because I found the visual experience of that game to be so next level that it's one of my favorite games, even though there are certainly elements of it. I'm like, yeah, that was fine. You know, I wouldn't want that and everything, but
100%. I don't know what the point of this video is. I think it's that people should realize that all video games are either tennis or dodgeball, and that...
Well, no, hold on. What's Sam's thing? It's a Pac-Man, a Frogger,
or a Tetris.
A Tetris, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to explore that one further.
Is it a tennis, a dodgeball, or a backgammon?
What the fuck is Wait.
Is that... I don't really know how to play backgammon, but it's the one that has the board where it's like a bunch of like really sharp triangles.
Yeah.
And there's like pieces and you manipulate them on the board.
Yeah, do something with it.
To score points or win curry favor.
Remember when we were gonna do what's the one with the pegs? That we were gonna stream that one time?
Oh, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Fuck. It's
what's that game called?
Yeah, I play it
Cribbage.
all the time. Thank you. Cribbage.
Yeah, we were gonna stream
Why
Cribbage.
were we gonna stream Cribbage again?
Because I thought it'd be fucking funny. Never happened though.
It's still
That's why we started losing subs, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, the Cribbage stream will bring them back.
Yeah.
What if we did topless Cribbage, but it's you and I?
I'm down. We
can do that. We'll do that. We'll do that when we are here for the Switch 2 preview event.
Yeah, and instead of talking about Switch 2, we play shirtless Cribbage. That is sure to get in the SEO a little bit better than Switch 2 hands-on preview.
Or what if the video is Switch 2 hands-on preview and we are talking about our hands-on preview?
While we're playing,
we're shirtless playing Cribbage.
then we'll look. I mean, this is really the Animal Crossing New Horizons approach, right? We're trying to approach two markets at once. The people that like shirtless videos, the Cribbage audience, and the Nintendo Switch 2 preview audience.
This is actually such a fucking stupid idea. I think we should actually do it.
Yeah.
Okay. Typically Tucker ends the video, but I have to this time.
Yeah, you have the button. I can't click it.
That's crazy. It's such an immense amount of power to have. I could never end the recording.
That wouldn't help either of us.
That's not funny enough to... Fuck, say something. Can you make some kind of noise? Can you make some kind of noise or some kind of gesture that'd be funny and I'll end on it?
That's a lot of pressure.
But then we've got Siscott here complicating that idea. Talking about an individual's sense of fun. Mm-hmm. And then we have Scruffy, I think, trying to... I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't know what I'm talking about.
With this whole thing?
Yeah, I don't know what I'm talking about. But because I feel like there's a problem here. Do you understand what I'm trying to express?
The problem? No. To be honest, no. That's what we get for the prompt being "is fun good?"
That is true. That is true.